Project Nuada, challenge of design and relativistic function. To tell this story, I have to explain some of the backstory of the project. I've been an AMD fan since all the way back when the K62 first came out, and ATI since at least the Mach 64. A lot of this was out of sheer necessity based on the price and availability, but also based on familiarity. I've had many an AMD system in the interim, and most recently had an AM3 Plus based computer. I present Demon, an AMD FX 6300 with 16GB of DDR3 1600 memory, an ASUS M5A97 motherboard, 4 500GB hard drives in RAID 10, and at the time a Radeon R9 270X. Basic peripherals included a Logitech G15 keyboard, the original one, a G700 mouse, and a craptastic basic audio headset. Now this setup served me dutifully for a couple of years as I'd never really played any highly demanding games, mostly older stuff like Need for Speed, Saints Row, and World of Warcraft. Now I try and build computers to be pretty much set for at least 3 years, if not longer with minor updates, and that brings us up to about the summer of 2015. The limitations of the AM3 Plus chipset were starting to annoy me, and I sought out to start speccing my next build. Problem number 1. There were no new AMD processors. Sure, there were the nice AMD APUs, but they aren't really an upgrade from an FX chip, and there was no true next-generation replacement for my aging FX processor. Rumors of the Zen were just starting to be heard in the distance, with no chance that they would arrive soon or be available anytime soon. So I thought I would bite the bullet and look into going Intel. Step into play, Skylake, Intel's new Wonder architecture. Specs had just been announced formally, which more than matched up with what I was looking for in a new computer. If I was going to build it to be future-proof, I would go ahead and max it out with the best CPU for the architecture. The i7-6700K with its 4 cores plus hyper-threading. Anything above the i5 is pretty much wasted for gaming, but I do occasionally run virtual machines or do minor rendering on the computer, so I could actually use the extra horsepower. Okay, chip found. Or not. Problem number 2. The chips ended up being in such low supply at the end of 2015 that they were nigh impossible to find anything close to their MSRP of $350. Most were seen for close to $600 if you could even find a place that had them in stock. Okay, not a big deal. I can wait until they come down in price, or I can wait until next year to get it. Problem number 3. Windows 10's free upgrade announced that it would expire June 29th of 2016. Later got pushed back to July. I now had a deadline of when I had to have this computer built to be able to migrate my Windows 7 key to and then upgrade to Windows 10. I'd been running the beta test for Windows 10 on my laptop since it went public, and I did like it. I would go forward on a clean Windows 10 install in the system to prep it for the future. Worst case, I could always just roll it back to Windows 7 or just suffer until the bugs were fixed, like I had done with Vista. So at this point, I made a couple of decisions. First, I would build a Skylake computer. Second, do it before the June cutoff, one way or another. Now, the easiest would be to go for a minimum level upgrade. This meant getting not only the bare necessities to build a computer, CPU, motherboard, and the RAM. CPU is roughly set, but I added in a concession that I would go for an i5-6600K as a compromise, as they were more readily in stock, and upgrade later if I really had to go that route. RAM, I would go for at least 8 gigs of RAM, just to be even with what I had been used to in the past. The motherboard, now this was a bit harder as I had not done any research into what the Z170 series chipsets had to offer per model beyond just the basic spec sheet. To make a long story short, I settled on the ASUS Z170A as it offered all the features I was looking for in a clean look without overselling the over-the-top features such as RGB lighting on the chipsets or full motherboard covers or any really funky colors. So I went to present to the spouse to get the ever-important spouse acceptance factor, or SAF, and hoped to smooth over some ruffled feathers at the few $100 I was looking at spending. I got the oddest response I was ever expecting. That's it? Excuse me? Why aren't you building it up bigger? This is probably already going to cost about $600 the way I have it designed. So, spec out what you really want, we'll budget for it. You sure? That can get pretty expensive. Yeah, sky's the limit as long as we can budget for it. Make it a long-term project. Okay. So I started down that rabbit hole making my parts list. Memory went from 8 gigs to 32 gig. Hard drives became SSDs. Continuing with playing with the other team's stuff led me to spec out replacing my faithful Radeon series card with an NVIDIA 980 Ti. Then two 980 Ti's and SLI. And then it went overkill. Designing a fully custom computer desk to house my new system and help show it off. Custom water loop to keep the whole system nice and cool. Integrated sound system, wide monitor layout, and on and on. Design took me about a week to figure out the final layout. With my list of parts now decided, Project Nuada was officially started with the purchase of the Asus Z170A motherboard in October. My eyes always watching the current prices of the CPU as that was the second most critical part. January 2016, prices were finally dropping and available stock rising enough for me to eventually manage to get the i7 I originally spec'd out at just over $400 from an in-store only deal. The following week, I had the surprise delivery of 32 gigs of RAM I wanted, courtesy of the spouse. More proof that the project idea was fully endorsed. Now I had the bare minimum to build and install Nuada. Daemon was therefore prominently backed up to my storage archive, all the software documented to make sure I didn't miss anything. Then came the task of the trusty old hardware swap, BIOS tuning, the subsequent 15% CPU overclock, RAID arrays were built, and eventually the always lovely task of installing Windows 10. Nuada lives! Thus, I get the beginnings of my new main computer into daily use. Even with keeping the same Radeon R9 270X installed, I went from 20 to 40 frames in WoW to almost 90 on Ultra. Other games I was getting 40 to 60 frames at Ultra or high settings, which worked well for me as I had a VSync enabled for the most part on my 60Hz monitor. And that gets us pretty much up to modern day. Very stable and rock solid system designed to last for years to come. Some of the other upgrades have occurred, and of course upgrades are still planned for it, but at a base level the computer is good to go. I hope this helps bring some insight to this, for me, a pretty large undertaking. If you want to follow with the future upgrades, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. I plan on adding reviews of the other parts as they come in, as well as other items. Feel free to help support this channel through the options in the video description below. Thank you for watching.